am Ariana Vale, and I am 29 years old. By the time I turned into my parents' driveway that night, my body felt like it was stitched together with exhaustion and caffeine. The steering wheel was still warm under my palms as I parked, the engine ticking softly like it was warning me not to move too fast. I had just finished a brutal 60-hour workweek at the logistics firm, still wearing my faded navy work shirt with my name stitched over the pocket. My bank balance sat at $418, my rent was due in 2 days, and every sensible instinct told me to go home, shower, and sleep. But my grandmother, Evelyn Hart, had insisted, no, commanded that I come. Her voice on the phone had been different. Firm. Waited. You must be here, Ariana. It matters. Before I even opened the car door, I sat there breathing, letting the glow from the house spill across the lawn like something out of a magazine spread. And before you go any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from, because stories like this don't just happen to people. They happen around people, and maybe you'll see yourself somewhere in mine. The house looked nothing like the one I grew up in. It had been renovated twice over the years, expanded, polished, dressed up like a trophy. Warm lights burned behind every window, shadows dancing as guests moved and laughed inside. It looked expensive. Alive. Successful. I felt like a stranger parked outside my own history. I stepped out of the car and closed the door quietly, smoothing my shirt even though it didn't help. The brick path felt colder than I expected under my shoes as I walked toward the front door. Laughter spilled out when I opened it, along with heat, perfume, and the sharp bite of champagne. Conversations overlapped, glasses clinked, and music hummed low in the background. My mother saw me instantly. Of course she did. She always had a way of noticing me only when there was an audience. Ariana, sweetheart, you made it, she called brightly, her voice just loud enough to draw attention. A few guests turned, offering polite nods before their focus slid back to the real center of gravity in the room. My older brother, Lucas Vale. Lucas stood near the fireplace, tall and confident, dressed in a tailored jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A massive flat-screen television behind him flipped through photos like a slideshow of triumph. Sun-washed beaches. Infinity pools. Candlelit dinners overlooking the ocean. His wife, Maribel, rested a manicured hand on his arm as he narrated each image with practiced ease. This one's from earlier this month, Lucas said, smiling. The sunset there never gets old. Murmurs of admiration rippled through the room. Someone whistled softly. Someone else laughed in disbelief. I hovered near the kitchen doorway, invisible as ever, whispering to myself, of course. Tonight belongs to him again. My father lifted his wine glass and tapped it gently with a spoon. The room quieted. A toast, he announced. To my children. Lucas for his incredible business success and Ariana for her. He paused, just a fraction too long. Dedication. The word landed like a pebble dropped into deep water. Small, dismissible, but heavy. I swallowed and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I slipped into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water instead of wine, and leaned against the counter. My hands were shaking slightly. I told myself it was fatigue. The hum of conversation resumed, louder now, and I checked my phone out of habit. The night felt thick, expectant. Then the doorbell rang. It cut through the noise cleanly, sharply, like a blade. My mother frowned. Who could that be? Everyone we invited is already here. My father walked to the door, irritation written across his face. When he opened it, the house fell into a strange, uneasy quiet. Standing in the doorway was my grandmother, Evelyn Hart, a small woman with a straight spine and sharp eyes, a single suitcase resting beside her like punctuation. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Conversations died mid-sentence. Music faded. Her gaze swept the room, calm and assessing, before she gave me a small, deliberate nod. Then her eyes locked onto Lucas. I arrived before midnight, she said evenly. Good. I have one question. Lucas smiled, polite but strained. Of course, Grandma Evelyn. What is it? She didn't smile back. She turned slightly, gesturing toward me. Ariana, she said, her voice steady. Why did you sell the $1.6 million coastal estate I purchased for you? The room froze. My glass of water stopped halfway to my lips. My heart slammed so hard I felt it in my throat. What? I asked quietly. Grandma, I don't own a house. I rent a studio apartment. Without a word, Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It moved from hand to hand, curiosity turning to confusion, until it reached me. My fingers went cold as I looked down. The image showed Lucas and Maribel standing proudly on a wide wooden deck. Behind them stretched an endless blue ocean, sunlight glinting off the water. I recognized the place instantly. It was the same house from the slideshow on the television. At the bottom of the photo, printed neatly, were the words, "Holiday prep at our Pacific retreat." I lifted my gaze slowly. Every face in the room had turned toward Lucas. His smile fractured. "Grandma," he said weakly, "that house belongs to a friend." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "A friend?" she asked calmly. "Then why are the utility accounts registered under your name, Lucas?" My father stiffened, clutching the envelope she handed him as if it might burn. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The room already felt like it was tilting. Lucas laughed nervously. "This is a misunderstanding. Ariana gave me permission to use the place. She didn't want it." I stepped forward, my pulse roaring in my ears. "I never gave you anything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I didn't even know a house existed until a few minutes ago. When did I give you permission?" Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it again. My parents rushed in, voices overlapping, trying to smooth, soften, dismiss. My mother's tone turned syrupy. "Ariana wasn't in a good place back then," she said. "She had issues." The word echoed. I turned toward her slowly. "Issues," I repeated. "Name one." Silence spread like spilled ink. No one spoke. No one could. Evelyn glanced at her watch, unbothered. "He should be here by now," she said. "Who?" Lucas asked, his voice thin. The doorbell rang again. This time I answered it. A man in his early 60s stood on the porch, wearing a gray suit dusted lightly with snow. He carried a black briefcase and held himself with quiet authority. "Mrs. Hart," he said respectfully, looking past me. "Apologies for the delay." "Come in, Mr. Caldwell," my grandmother said. The man stepped inside, setting his briefcase on the dining table. Lucas stood abruptly. "I need the bathroom." "Sit down," Evelyn said quietly. Lucas sat. Mr. Caldwell opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. "This is the deed to the coastal property," he announced. "Purchased in October 2020. Owner of record, Ariana Vale." The room erupted in whispers. My knees felt weak as I stared at my name printed in ink. "I've never seen this," I whispered. "We know," Caldwell replied. "Here is the transfer document filed later, claiming Ariana gifted the property to Lucas Vale." He slid the paper forward. "That's not my handwriting," I said, barely audible. "Correct," he replied calmly. "It matches Lucas's." Shock cracked through the room. Maribel covered her mouth. My father's face drained of color. "You're accusing me of fraud," Lucas shouted, standing again. "Yes," Caldwell said simply. Evelyn tapped her cane once against the floor. "Enough," she said. "Ariana already knows everything. Tonight was to see who would tell the truth." The truth settled over the room like a heavy fog. And as I stood there, heart racing, one realization cut deeper than all the others combined. Whatever this night was going to become, my life would never be the same again. The silence that followed Evelyn's words was thick and suffocating, like the house itself was holding its breath. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant echo of fireworks somewhere far away, rehearsing for midnight. Yet inside that living room, time felt frozen. Lucas was the first to break. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice shaking despite his attempt to sound angry. "You can't just barge in here with papers and make accusations at a family gathering." Mr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses calmly. "These are not accusations, Mr. Vale. They are verified legal documents." My father stepped forward, palms raised in a placating gesture. "Mom, maybe you're mistaken. You bought that property for the family, not specifically for Ariana." Evelyn turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were disappointed, and somehow that was worse. "Is that what you told yourself?" she asked quietly. My mother rushed in beside him, her smile trembling. "Ariana wasn't stable back then," she said again, more insistently this time. "She was overwhelmed, working too much, not thinking clearly. We were protecting her." I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a cord being cut. "Protecting me?" I asked. My voice surprised even me with how steady it sounded. "By stealing from me? By lying about me?" My mother faltered. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," I said. "Explain why I've worked myself into the ground for years while Lucas lived like a king." Evelyn glanced at her watch again. "We're running out of time," she said. Proceed. Mr. Caldwell opened another folder and laid out additional documents across the dining table. Mrs. Hart retained my services after noticing inconsistencies in her financial records. This includes rental income generated from the coastal property. Lucas stiffened. Rental income? Yes, Caldwell replied. The property was listed as a short-term luxury rental for over 3 years. He slid forward a printed spreadsheet. Rows of numbers filled the page. Average monthly income, he continued, was approximately $14,800. Total revenue to date, $532,000. My vision blurred. All that time, I whispered. I was skipping meals. Lucas swallowed hard. I was maintaining the property, he muttered. It wasn't free. Evelyn's voice cut through him like ice. You were stealing. The clock on the wall clicked closer to midnight. The television behind Lucas switched automatically to a live broadcast, a crowd counting down in another city, unaware of the implosion happening here. Mr. Caldwell closed one folder and opened another. There is more, he said gently, turning to me. Ariana, you applied to several senior analyst roles in the past few years. You reached final interview stages multiple times. I nodded slowly. And then I was ghosted. He handed me a printed email. My hands shook as I read it. The message warned the employer that I had a history of substance abuse, emotional instability, and ongoing psychiatric care. It said I was a liability. That email, Caldwell said, originated from an anonymous account. The IP address traces back to this house. The room spun. I looked at my parents. You did this, I whispered. You destroyed my career. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. Caldwell laid out 2 more emails. Sent to different companies. Same claims. Same source. I set the papers down carefully, like they were dangerous. You didn't just steal a house, I said quietly. You stole years of my life. The television erupted into cheers as the countdown reached its final seconds. 10, 9, 8. Evelyn stood, tapping her cane once on the floor. Michael, she corrected herself sharply. Lucas, you had every chance to tell the truth. You chose not to. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, the television shouted. No one cheered. Guests began slipping out quietly, coats pulled on in awkward silence, eyes avoiding mine. Chairs scraped. Glasses clinked. Within minutes, only family remained. Mr. Caldwell spoke again. Mr. Vale, you have 5 minutes before I file criminal charges. Lucas's face crumpled. You can't do this. Evelyn turned to me. Your decision, she said softly. Civil action. Criminal charges. Or both. I looked at my brother, the boy who once taught me how to ride a bike, who once promised to always protect me. That version of him felt like a stranger now. Lucas grabbed his coat. Maribel, let's go. You're not leaving, Caldwell said, producing a document. Restraining order. Effective immediately. Lucas's anger exploded. Dad said this was legal. My father snapped back, panic breaking through. You told me she signed everything. And you told me to send those emails. Lucas shouted. You said she wasn't ready for success. My mother collapsed into sobs. Evelyn leaned toward me and whispered, Never interrupt your enemies when they're destroying themselves. Mr. Caldwell slid one final report toward me. When was the last time you checked your credit? I frowned. A year ago. Your current score is 432, he said gently. I shook my head. That's impossible. He flipped the page. Business loan. Personal loan. Credit cards. All in my name. The money trail was clear. You buried me in debt, I said. To save yourselves. My mother reached for me. I stepped back. Don't, I said. Just don't. Evelyn moved to the center of the room, pulling out a sealed envelope. This is my updated will, she announced. All of you are removed. Gasps filled the space. My entire estate, she continued, goes to Ariana. Lucas tried to edge toward the door. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Lucas Vale, one said. You are under arrest. Maribel screamed. Lucas looked at me desperate. Please. You did this, I said. Not me. The cuffs clicked shut. As the door closed behind them, Mr. Caldwell turned to my parents. You're next. My mother begged. My father denied. I crossed my arms. You stopped being my parents the day you forged my name. They were led away. When the house finally fell silent, only 3 of us remained. Evelyn sat heavily on the couch. Are you all right? I don't know yet, I said. Mr. Caldwell packed his briefcase. One last thing. He showed me a tablet. An offshore account. $380,000. Lucas was preparing to disappear. I exhaled slowly. Can it be seized? Already in progress. When he left, the house felt colder. Heavier. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling until exhaustion claimed me, knowing deep down that this wasn't the end. It was only the middle. Morning arrived without ceremony. No sunlight cutting dramatically through curtains. No sense of relief or triumph. Just a pale gray dawn settling over the house like dust after a collapse. I woke on the couch with my neck stiff and my head heavy, the events of the night before replaying in fragments rather than a clean sequence. My phone lay face down on the coffee table, exactly where I'd left it, mercifully silent. The house felt wrong in daylight. Too large. Too quiet. Like a stage after the audience has left, props still standing but meaning drained from them. I sat up slowly, rubbing my temples, and for a moment I wondered if any of it had been real. The accusations. The documents. The arrests. Then I saw the empty space by the door where my parents' coats used to hang. It was real. I made coffee because it felt like something normal people did after their lives cracked open. The machine gurgled and hissed, grounding me in sound and routine. I stood at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around the mug, staring at nothing while the weight of everything settled deeper into my chest. Not sharp pain, not grief, but something hollow and quiet. Like a room after furniture has been hauled away. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Caldwell. Lucas was denied bail. Flight risk. Offshore assets. Severity of charges. I read it once. Then again. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel relief. I felt still, as if a door I'd been pushing against for years had finally closed on its own. Another message followed. Your parents were granted bail. Amount set at $60,000 each. Mrs. Hart declined to assist. I pictured my father making phone calls he never imagined he'd have to make, asking relatives for help, explaining crimes he'd spent years denying. I pictured my mother crying into someone else's kitchen table. The images felt distant, like scenes from a story I used to belong to, but didn't anymore. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug. 3 days later, I rented a small moving truck. Everything I owned fit into it with room to spare. 2 suitcases. A box of books. My laptop. A few framed photos I hadn't yet thrown away. I stood in the parking lot of my studio apartment looking up at the building, cracked stucco, flickering hallway lights, and felt no nostalgia at all. Only readiness. The drive to the coast took hours, winding through roads I'd only ever seen on screens. I'd looked at the house online so many times without knowing it was mine, admired its clean lines and endless ocean backdrop like it belonged to another universe. Seeing it in person made my chest tighten. It stood alone, modern and quiet, glass reflecting the gray sky, the ocean stretched behind it like a living painting. I parked the truck and sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, afraid that if I moved too quickly it might vanish. The lockbox clicked open easily. The door swung inward. Inside, the house was empty in a way that felt intentional. Court orders had cleared out anything Lucas or Maribel had brought. Only the furniture my grandmother had chosen remained. Simple, elegant, untouched. I walked through each room slowly, my footsteps echoing softly, like I was touring a museum dedicated to a life I never got to live. This was supposed to be mine, I whispered to no one. I stepped out onto the back deck and let the wind hit my face. The ocean rolled endlessly, indifferent and steady. I stayed there for a long time, breathing, letting the salt air cut through the fog in my head. When I finally pulled out my phone, my hands were steadier than they'd been in weeks. I'm here, I texted my grandmother. The reply came almost instantly. Good. That's where you always should have been. February brought updates I didn't ask for. An aunt called, her voice careful, like she was walking through a room full of broken glass. Your parents are selling their house, she said. They're devastated. I know, I replied gently. They want to talk to you. They can talk to my attorney. There was a pause. She's still your mother. I closed my eyes. She forged my name. She lied to destroy my future. She stopped being my mother long before I stopped answering. When the call ended, I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear. Later that month, Mr. Caldwell emailed the settlement details. After the sale of my parents' home and the clearing of their mortgage, $590,000 was awarded to me as partial restitution. I didn't attend the sale. I didn't drive by for one last look. That chapter was already sealed shut. In early March, he mentioned that Maribel had filed for divorce. She claims she was misled, he said over the phone. She's seeking what little remains. I pictured her perfectly styled photos, her careful smiles. Then she married the wrong version of him, I said simply. Mid-March brought numbers instead of emotions. A forensic accountant sat across from me at the long dining table, laying out spreadsheets like puzzle pieces. Mortgage payments siphoned off. Loans taken in my name. Opportunities lost because of sabotaged references. Legal fees. Total damages, he concluded, tapping the final page, approximately $2.4 million. Will I ever see that money? I asked. He folded his hands. Lucas will be paying for the rest of his life. Garnished wages. Asset seizures. If he ever has income. I nodded. That's enough. April was quieter. Healing moved slowly, invisibly, like ice melting beneath the surface. My credit score crept upward as fraudulent accounts were erased. 400 became 500. 5 became 6. Each small increase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. In May, I bought a used silver sedan with cash. It wasn't flashy. It didn't turn heads. But when I drove it off the lot, something in my chest loosened. It was mine. Fully. Cleanly. One morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. This is the hospital, the voice said. Your grandmother experienced a mild cardiac episode. The world narrowed to a single point. I drove faster than I should have, heart pounding the entire way. When I reached her room, she was sitting up, annoyed more than fragile. Don't look at me like that, she said dryly. I'm not going anywhere. I laughed, tears spilling despite myself. The doctor explained it was stress-induced, manageable with rest. I squeezed her hand harder than I meant to. You're staying with me, I said. She argued. I insisted. We compromised, weekend visits, nightly calls, no excuses. By June, the case concluded. Lucas accepted a plea deal. Guilty on all counts. 8 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole after 5. Mr. Caldwell called me after it was finalized. How do you feel? I stood on the deck, watching the waves roll in and out. I don't, I said after a moment. And I think that's okay. That's normal, he replied. When the call ended, I stayed there, breathing, letting the quiet wrap around me. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt steady. In August, a silver car appeared at the end of my driveway. My mother stepped out, thinner than I remembered, eyes red and pleading. Please, she said. I just want to talk. You're trespassing, I replied calmly. I've lost everything, she cried. Your father can't find work. We're barely surviving. I raised my phone. You have 10 seconds. She hesitated. I started counting. She left. I went back inside and finished my coffee. September brought opinions. Some family members thought I'd gone too far. Others thought I hadn't gone far enough. I listened without absorbing any of it. Their judgments no longer lived rent-free in my head. By winter, my consulting business was steady. Not spectacular. Not glamorous. But stable. I had friends who knew the truth, a grandmother who checked on me relentlessly, and a life that no longer felt like it was constantly about to collapse. 1 year later, on New Year's Eve, I stood alone on the deck of the coastal house. No guests. No champagne flutes. No countdown blaring from a screen. Just the ocean, dark and endless, and fireworks blooming faintly in the distance like quiet punctuation marks. I lifted a glass of water toward the horizon. Happy New Year, I whispered. Not to the past. Not to the people who broke me. To myself. I didn't win a war. I simply walked away from one I never agreed to fight. And standing there in the cool wind, I finally understood something simple and unshakable. Peace is a form of wealth. And if this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from, because sometimes